Are we happy? Come on, smile. This will end soon. It will, I promise. What do I know? This could go on forever. It just feels that way. I'm going to remind you of something I told you, I think, last week. It was only the week before the Super Bowl that I remember this vividly. You know, friends, we were out for dinner, my wife and friends, another couple. We had dinner and we were walking out of the restaurant, and I said, boy, you know what? It's like golf season in 6 weeks. We haven't had any snow. That was a week before the Super Bowl. Then there was Martin Luther King Jr. Day that the kids had school off, and they haven't been back to school any Monday since, and we feel like this has been forever, but it will come, there will be sunshine, and there will be warmth, and there will be melting, and there will be mud, and it will be good. Welcome in to my state of mind on a Monday evening. Of course we're going to talk about the weather. Mr. Mangione was here. He's Mangione? Mangione. See, I don't pronounce the E because I'm Irish, but he's Italian, so you pronounce the E. So anyway, weatherman extraordinaire will share his thoughts on the weather and the forecast for the next couple of months and all of that in a segment that we smartly recorded on Friday afternoon here, knowing what we were going to be dealing with today. So welcome in to the Dan York extravaganza, sort of. Let's check the rundown. Yeah, it is. And there's not much left to say about it. These guys, you can't trust them to throw them, and dealing with them on an above-the-board basis is just not possible. So the lead television anchor needs a few. Okay, he may need a lot more than a few as this whole story kind of rolls out. I have no idea what's going on with this guy. He can't get out of his own way, nor out of the public way now. Some sports notes, some good basketball yet to come here. It's getting very exciting. And, of course, we've got a saga now on your state of mind that's called Jess's Parking Dilemma. So let us dig in here. Yep, it's beginning to look a lot like it. Anyway, you know the funny thing about this whole thing? We got to show our traditional video of snow. like you need this. All you got to do is look out the window, for crying out loud. But on the radio today at WPRO from noon to 3, it was just kind of this thing where I could feel it. You know, I always come with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things to talk about because it's kind of my job. But no one was into anything. Yet when it came to the snow, no one had anything left to say. Except for Angelo. He put it right.
I hear the complaining. It's New England. It snows. We just haven't had this much in a while. So everybody's like upset, but it's nobody's problem. You know what I mean? We're just going to take care of it, shovel your own thing, get it done. The plows are all, it's not 4 feet in the street. That means they plowed.
Yeah.
You know, they can't do any more. Go with it.
Just go with it. Really, it's one of those things where right now there's nothing much left to say. You can complain about the roads, but the truth of the matter is that when you get this kind of snow, we're not going to be able to get more than 30 miles per hour on the highway. I am a little concerned about you knuckleheads that think that you are invincible and you think 45, 50 miles per hour on a completely snow-covered, icy highway is okay for you. You may have traction getting out with your four-wheel or front wheel. You may have all of that, but you know what? Your stopping power isn't any better than anybody else's. Just in case you wanted to know. In fact, I passed a Ripta bus on the Wampanoag Trail over here today. You know, passing me in the left lane, I got stuck between a couple of plows. But, you know, 1 car length behind a small little car. What if he's got to hit? Would you give yourself some room, please? Thank you. All right, let us go to the claims of ISIS. The New York Daily News has this .com column headline. Yeah. So Jordan saying ISIS isn't trustworthy, and why wouldn't they say ISIS isn't trustworthy? CBS latest.
ISIS claims one of Jordan's airstrikes killed 26-year-old American aid worker Kayla Mueller, missing since she was taken hostage in Syria in 2013. U.S. officials have found no evidence confirming Mueller's death. On Face the Nation, Jordan's media minister dismissed the claim.
They tend to lie about these things all the time. They're liars. They don't have any respect for human lives.
Jordan's Air Force chief says the country has achieved the revenge it promised after ISIS burned a Jordanian pilot to death. Meanwhile, Kayla Mueller's family continues their agonizing wait.
Yeah, and they've been sending private messages to ISIS, and they're asking for private reaction. And the Muellers are dealing with ISIS as if they're an entity that can be fairly negotiated with, and it's heartbreaking to watch. Young girl, 26 years of age. I mean, what kind of spirit and courage and strength does a young woman have to be out there doing that kind of humanitarian work in Syria, only to be captured? Their parents must be so proud and so heartbroken at the same time. The idea that there's any fair or straight story coming out of that part of the world is impossible now. Jordan says ISIS is lying. You tend to want to believe Jordan, they're an ally, but there's all sorts of lies and half-truths going on out there right now, and all you can do is pray for all of the Muellers here, and maybe there'll be a good outcome, but oh boy. Taking a few days, speaking of oh boy, yeah, guess what? All of a sudden the ratings numbers started to hit the proverbial fan. A little overnight seepage for NBC. The headline for Brian Williams, yep, it's going to be a few days, he says. He's all of a sudden realized that he is becoming part of the story. Even in that insulated environment at 30 Rock in New York, he has finally figured out that his credibility has been questioned. And now when he is the story, when people are watching his newscasts thinking, what will he say next about the story of having his helicopter back in 2003 while he was doing an embedded story in Iraq, his helicopter being hit by an RPG and then misremembering it and all of that. Now everyone's kind of on his truth tale. And a lot of social media, and NBC has launched an internal investigation, and he's taking a few days during that. My guess is that a few days will be a few days more. Some people think he's too big to fail for NBC. Nobody is too big to fail. Although when somebody big like that fails, it's a big financial hit, not only for him, but for the network. There's a reason they pay him $10 million a year. We'll see. I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for him to come back too quickly. Bruce Jenner, I wouldn't hold your breath on a bunch of things with Bruce Jenner. CNN.com, I mean, this guy just can't seem to stay out of the news even when he wants to. And of course, he's announcing, tells his mom, and word comes out that he's about ready to become Brianna rather than Bruce or something. And we've had enough of these conversations in a responsible fashion here that the transgendered thing is real and it's identity, crisis stuff, and it's hard. But this is America's best athlete back when he won the decathlon. And now he's become kind of the reality show joke, and then he runs into this problem.
Pictures of the four-car chain reaction crash on PCH in Malibu Saturday show the front end of the white Lexus smashed in. A friend now tells us the woman driving that car was 69-year-old Kim Howie. Investigators say after the black Prius stopped or slowed down, Jenner was the third car in the crash and pushed Howie's white Lexus into another lane where she was hit by a Hummer. Jenner released this statement Sunday saying, "My heartfelt and deepest sympathies go out to the family and loved ones and to all of those who were involved or injured in this terrible accident."
Ditto there for the victim. But I don't know what to say other than this guy's got a strange thing going on right now, and I'm sure all you got to do is watch a Kardashian episode and you'll probably hear all about it. On a much lighter and better note, we had Dan Hurley here the other day, head coach at URI, and he was talking about how it's getting fun, piling up the wins. Well, they did it again this past weekend. URI beats Richmond. Great headline in the Providence Journal. This is a game that was a difficult one on the schedule simply because they did, and now they're tied for first place with VCU. And when have you seen that lately? So we could have two tournament teams. The Friars at PC were sitting pretty good, and now they've lost 2 out of the last 3. And of course, it wasn't good when Ed Cooley had to leave the facility. The headline, thank goodness, Kevin McNamara from the Providence Journal reports that he's just fine. He's going to be just fine. I mean, think about it. I mean, Cooley walk-off. Good thoughts for Cooley, reportedly. Coach is coming back on Wednesday when Villanova comes into town. And they've only got 2 losses, 6th ranked in the country. Big one for the Friars on Wednesday night. All right, your state of mind. This is how you get in touch with us. Simply call us at 228-1886, email us, Facebook post, tweet, that kind of thing. So you remember maybe last Friday night, I was telling you that this was the note that was left on Jess's car. You know, Jess, our producer, Jessica. And she said, well, listen, you know, the guy shoveled the space. It's a public space on the street, and then I parked in there, and then he left that. I asked what you thought about it, and Courtney had the same story.
I've actually, and I live in an apartment building. Now, I had a neighbor. He was a little bit older than me, not too much older, 63, wasn't too much older. He shoveled out a space. I pulled in that space, like, after he had left, and he acted like he had a heart attack, and he blamed a heart attack on me, and I didn't move my car. I could not see why I had to move my car when we all live in apartment buildings and we all have no, assigned parking. I don't know. I just didn't see the point in that.
I think I've got an idea for a new show. It's called Snow Court. A lot of arguments out there. All right, let's talk to the weather guy in an episode that we recorded for you tonight on Friday, and then we'll be back. Yeah, so it's Monday night, and we've been dealing with more snow. Now, to be honest with you, as I told you prior, we recorded this on Friday because you can't get a weather guy to talk to you during weather. You can only get weather guys to talk to you pre or post weather. But need I remind you what the blizzard totals were? Oh my goodness. I mean, it was just unbelievable. We got to talk about the New York part because, you know, a storm moves in one direction and these poor weather guys get the tar beat out of them. How are you, Peter?
Good. How you doing, Dan?
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
One of the phenomenal weather team here. It was only a few weeks ago, because last night I was saying to my wife, I don't think I'm going to make it through this, you know, psychologically. This is just the most brutal winter. She says, don't you remember we were out to dinner with our friends? And it was a week before the Super Bowl, and we were walking out of the restaurant together, and I said, boy, we've really gotten away with a pretty easy winter. And since the blizzard, it feels like we've had it forever.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. I don't know if you want to talk to the psychology of weather versus the forecasting of weather, but
Well, I could start with the psychology. I think that...
Do you study the psychology of weather and how it reacts, how people deal with your good or bad news?
Unintentionally, I do, because, you know, we hear from people all the time, and like you were saying, when we were sort of at the beginning of the winter and we hadn't had much snow yet, it was almost like people kind of wanted that first storm. They said, hey, when's it going to finally start snowing? And then you end up with not one, but kind of 2 big storms in a row, and everybody's saying, okay, enough. So now I'll often get comments, you know, walking around public, maybe the gym where I've seen you before, and people, they're obviously joking, but they plead, they beg, hey, can you keep the snow away? We've had enough. So it's almost like people wanted that first big storm, maybe the second, and now they're just done.
Yeah, well, count me in that category. Even the skiers have to be a little bit like, I need to get to the mountain, for crying out loud.
Exactly, yeah.
What happened here? What happened?
Well, you know, I've seen this happen before around here and really across much of the country. You can sort of get in these patterns where nothing happens, but then once you flip that switch, you can get one storm after another, and that's sort of what's happened this winter. Certainly been cold enough. So first we had the cold, and then once the storm tracks started kind of lining up, they've just been coming in one after the other, and as we're talking, it is likely snowing right now with this other storm coming in. So
is there a system? Is there a trend? Is it global warming? I mean, that's a whole bailiwick. That's a whole nother can of worms. Maybe we'll get to that in the next segment. But is it something that's identifiable? That you knew it was coming?
You know, not really. I mean, especially working in the TV world, we kind of work more short-term forecasters. So we have to be very focused on the next 24 hours, the commutes, the next 7 days, maybe the next 14 days. We don't spend a whole lot of time looking 3, 4, 6 months in advance. And even those that do, it's really sort of an educated guess, a percentage, because once you get 1, 2, 3 months into the future, it's tough to kind of look for that signal. Okay, now we know it's really going to start snowing. Now, there were signs, even when we had a pretty quiet beginning of the winter here, there were signs that things were at least going to get colder, and that's one of the ingredients you need. You need the cold. So once we sort of saw that coming together, we knew we had the cold, then it was, all right, we know we have piece number 1. Now let's see if we can get piece number 2, actual moisture and the actual storm track coming on through. But it is really tough as a forecaster to sit in November or December and say, okay, 1 month from now it's really going to start to crank up. You can kind of see general trends, like late winter we might get above average snowfall, but in terms of seeing when that switch actually flips, that's a tough thing to see. We really are not there with the science just yet.
You love this stuff, don't you?
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is like...
We do. We like to talk about it. We study it.
You're high profile in the newscasts. You're the key go-to people. I mean, the weather, is such a studied, important thing for the viewers anyway. I mean, you are high profile performers, educators, professionals anyway. But you wake up like a kid at Christmas when you see something like this going on?
Sometimes. Yeah. It really depends. The blizzard was actually somewhat of an easy forecast for us. So yes, there was some excitement on my part because it's kind of the first big storm of the year. We're pretty confident in looking at the information that yes, this is going to happen. We can get people prepared. There are some cases where you are not quite as excited. For instance, that storm about a week ago now, where it was a mix of rain and sleet. Those are a lot trickier to forecast. So yeah, you have that excitement, but you also have a little bit of the dread because you know that sleet mixing is going to be there. You don't know exactly how long it's going to go on. And it makes for much more of a headache of a forecast. So there's also a little bit of trepidation sometimes when you see these storms coming, especially when you have that mixing issue.
All right, so there's been a lot of discussion to our south and west, New York, for instance, about the miss and how disappointed they were. We'll talk about the pressure of the forecast when we come back. Stay with us. Yeah, so this is the snow in New York, and it stopped at 9 inches, and for some reason, they seem like they're disappointed down there. What, are you kidding me? You have any idea what a blizzard of 20-plus inches does to Manhattan? Your own sister turned on you, you told me.
Yeah, I was saying that my sister who lives in New York City, when they did not get as much snow as they thought, she said, Pete, you guys messed up. Kind of like grouping us all together, which is a common thing to do.
Right. All I have to do is get on the radio and start talking about you guys. Of course, there are many, many excellent female meteorologists here and beyond. But all you got to do is start talking about your industry.
Right.
And I can sit back, put my feet up, and just watch the phones explode with probably more criticism than accolades. It is not an easy business when you miss, right?
It is not. No, and trust me, when we have had forecasts that miss, especially when it comes to snow, you hear about it on the email especially. Not so much in public. I've never had really somebody come up to me in person and get angry about the forecast, but the emails, that's where people really get pretty brave with their criticisms. And
welcome to the club, pal.
Yeah, I'm sure you deal with it too.
Yeah, the keyboard courage out there.
Yes, a lot of keyboard courage. I like that phrase.
Yes, exactly. Been there, understand that.
Yep.
The CBS head of news, whether on the CBS Morning Show, happened to just watch it the other morning after the blizzard, was trying to explain away that a 50-mile miss is not really a big miss.
It's not by what the computer models are doing. When you look at like a grid point on a map, it's actually a very small difference. But obviously, when you're talking about millions and millions of people, it's a huge difference. And that forecast for New York City was much more difficult than the forecast that we had. We had a lot of wiggle room as that blizzard was approaching. Whether it wobbled a few miles this way or this way, we knew we were kind of in the bullseye, so it was a little easier for us. New York City, I was looking at some of the models, what they were doing for New York. Some had over 2 feet of snow, others had 7 or 8 inches, right? And that becomes a very tricky forecast because even though you do want to be careful to convey uncertainty, and this is one of the things that the Weather Service was talking about, that maybe we all need to do a better job of sort of conveying uncertainty. But let's say you're a decision maker in New York City, right? And the meteorologist tells you, which is what I would have said, hey, you have about a 50% chance of seeing over 2 feet and a 50% chance of seeing maybe 6 or 7 inches. At some point, if they're shutting down subways, at some point they have to make a decision. They just can't go on the chances, and that's what makes that forecast so tough.
Yeah, well, and you know, the economics of your work are really important. I mean, you can scare people out of local stores and stop commerce with an oversell of the forecast. At the same time,
Right.
when it comes to preparation and safety, if you undersell it, you get jammed up that way too.
Exactly.
So
it's a fine line.
you guys just want to be umpires. That you know, you called the game, it did what you said it was going to do, and
Ideally, yes.
Whatever.
And I like that you use that analogy because sometimes, and I think when I was on the radio with you last week, sometimes we feel like umpires a little bit because if you actually look at our track record, most of the time the forecast is fairly accurate, but it's the times that it's not where people tend to notice.
yeah.
So that's when we hear from people. But I guess that's life.
This frigid cold, though, is something that, you know, an extended period of time, I don't think we've seen in a while. Maybe the data will show that we have, but for some reason it just feels somewhat unbearable. And wind chills, you know, below 0. You feel living here like we actually live up north in Bangor or Virgins or Burlington or Montreal or, you know, it's, oof.
Yeah, the past couple of years we've had several really impressive cold snaps. And I tell you what, even though some of this week doesn't look too bad, it looks like the next weekend we could be in the deep with that Arctic air once again. So
Really?
that pattern of Arctic air looks like, for the most part, it may stay with us for the next month or two. You get a few warm spells in between, but on average, it looks like we'll continue to kind of
month
trend.
or two?
Yeah, I'm talking about into March. I was actually just looking, Dan, before I came on at some of the long-term models through March, and it showed on average below normal temperatures. Now, this doesn't mean you don't get those thaws and those warm-ups in between, but just when you average everything out, it does look like we kind of stay with the colder
Well,
temperatures.
I know you like to hit the little white ball. When am I teeing up? What day will they say course is open? When?
Wow, that is a great question.
Please.
Well, you know,
Please.
even though the models...
Don't tell me June.
Definitely not June. I would say even in March, even though the computer information trends colder, once we get to March, we do have the ability to get those in-between periods where it does warm up a little bit. So, you know, I'm not sure exactly how those courses make their decisions, but I would think that some of the hardcore golfers might be able to get out at a few places sometime in March.
Sometime in March. It's a
Yeah.
long month, man.
It is a long month.
See?
It is.
I still couldn't get a date out of you. You know, it is science, but it is not exact.
It is. Well, maybe we should go together.
Yes. Well, there you go.
And if it's too cold, you can play me.
I'll play in anything.
Yeah.
As long as you can get the tee in the ground.
That's
Play in
true.
anything.
You can play in some pretty cold weather if you want.
All right. So there's your forecast. What are you going to do? Peter, thanks. Appreciate all your work.
Yep.
One more thought when we come back. Stay with us. No more weather talk until Thursday. Tomorrow, opposition to a felony charge for protesting on the highway. See you on the radio at noon on WPRO. See ya.